Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Again, welcome to AMCF's National Muslim Endowment Council meeting. This is our third convening. We're really excited to have today both our endowments, our hosted endowments joining us, and community members. We open this session to the community at large. And we're really excited to host two very special guests that I'll introduce in just a little bit, Brother Safir and Brother Abdelwahab from the Islamic Endowment Foundation. Just to get us on a bit of like a agenda here on what we're going to do. There are a lot of people on the call today, so I'm going to ask you to put your introductions in the chat. If you can go ahead and share your name, if you have an organizational affiliation, location, and please do mention if you're a hosted endowment with us, and we'll highlight our endowments as well later on. We're going to take a few minutes just, again, since we are opening this up to the community to talk about what AMCF is, who we are, what our work is. Then we are going to turn it to Andrew Tang, who is here from our asset management team from Andalus and Turner Financial Group. Also, Brother Ghuri from our asset management group is here. And he'll give us a brief 10-minute market update. I know it's probably not going to do it justice with the craziness that we're seeing, but we'll do our best. Then we're going to give the floor to Brother Safir and Abdelwahab for the main feature of today. Then we'll close talking both about, they'll mention what they can offer in terms of support with endowments, and we'll also wrap up talking about how you can open an endowment with AMCF and questions. And I'll let each person dictate, like Andrew and Brother Safir and Mohiuddin, if you want, sorry, and Abdelwahab, if you want to take questions as you go along or reserve them for the end. So with that, Bismillah. So AMCF is a community foundation that caters specifically to the needs of the American Muslim community and ally communities. The goal of AMCF is really to connect donors to causes around the country and around the globe that do amazing work, and to approach philanthropy more strategically. We do this with a vision of leading against sustainable and strategic Muslim philanthropy for today and generations to come. So we really think about philanthropy and charity and zakat, all of that in the long term, what kind of communities we want to create through those vehicles. Our mission is to cultivate that donor giving and diversify it as well, to advance all the great causes that all of you are a part of and beyond. And some of the values that we use and we hold very dearly as we carry out that mission is to be sacred, strategic, sustainable, collaborative, diverse, inclusive, and to do this all with integrity. Just to highlight really quickly a few of our other nonprofit programs and services, obviously endowments, the reason that we're here today, is the obvious one, but we also work with nonprofits in other capacities. We feature them through different platforms such as social media and the Muslim Philanthropy Podcast. We've had for several years now the Social Impact Accelerator Program, which we have continued this year through monthly webinars. Our upcoming webinar is next Wednesday, and then there's one after that, and it's talking about, we'll have some really great speakers from the Muslim Legal Fund of America talking about nonprofit compliance in our current climate. So if you'd like more information about that, please reach out, and I'm constantly sending the email blasts as well. And then lastly, our newest addition has been the Nonprofit Resource Center. This is a kind of a center that we are developing and building. There's already a page on our website, and it has tons of resources for nonprofits, and we're hoping to build on top of that consulting and link it to the webinars and other capacity building programs we have to really support whatever needs you have as a nonprofit. And just a quick snapshot of our impact. These are kind of our current numbers, and alhamdulillah, growing. I think the DAF's number is already outdated. So inshallah, continuing to grow as an organization. I'm going to stop right there and do the rest of this later on. So I'm going to hand it over to Brother Safir and, to Andrew first from Turner Financial Group to give us our market update. Andrew, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sister Ola. I want to start off with to say that never a boring day is quite an understatement in today's environment. Even though most of us, investors and citizens alike, we do understand what the intentions are in terms of the effort of onshoring manufacturing activities and also imposing a fair tax, an import tax, right? And that's what I call tariffs. But it does have unintended consequences. And we have seen the market sold off, quite profoundly in recent days, and then rebounded profoundly yesterday as well. So these kind of wild swings, unfortunately, they're still based on sentiments, and they're also still based on politics. So because of the fact that these market volatilities are still based on sentiment and politics, what that means is that the reversal can happen in a very, very quick way. So the snapback can happen very quickly. Now, we have seen that most of the countries around the world have some way, somehow, over 70 countries have already collaborated or started negotiating with the White House, with the US. The only wild card right now remaining is China, right? And so you probably have heard of China retaliating with 84% tariffs, and then the US is imposing 125. I just want to let the audience know that these are not realistic numbers, meaning you might as well put them up to 200, 400, even 1,000%. Because in actuality, in business, globally speaking, anything over 25%, it's already not a real number, not a reality, not sustainable. So the rhetoric between 84 and 125, this is already in the not real realm right here. So I just want to let everybody know that. So what that means is that, unfortunately, the Chinese like to save face. They want to look good in public. And their leader have this issue of playing hard, playing hardball with anybody who seems to be attacking them, and that's exactly how they feel it. But the effort for all countries to work towards a fair trade agreement, meaning having the same percentage of tax on their imports, is not as easy as they think. But at the same time, the current leader, Xi Jinping, it's not going to risk to allow China to fall into economic chaos. Because in this particular case, if China falls into economic chaos right now, that will be another burden that is adding on top of what they're currently going through, which is slow growth. That's one. And second is that they have an insane amount of non-transparent debt. And you know how Mohammed and I feel about debt. We don't like that at all, because that is a reflection of a not healthy economic environment or financial system. And so if China falls into economic chaos, it will cause a revolt, and the citizens will start to look for alternatives. And Xi Jinping does not want that to happen. So this current standoff between China and US, we believe it will last perhaps just a few days more. But going forward, if this escalate, basically keeps going, you're going to see most likely a third party, somebody is going to broker a peace deal, or basically a real hard negotiation is already underway, actually, according to sources from Taiwan. And so it gives me quite a bit of comfort of what it can happen, on a positive note. But negatively, what could happen, we also like to point that out as well, is that if these negative tariffs, they do carry through, what that means is that there's going to be a repeat of global supply chain disruption. And if there's any kind of global supply chain disruption, that means that manufacturing facilities will have to stop. They have to idle. Because if there's any missing parts, even one part or two part that are important on making a finished product, the whole assembly line just stop. And when that happens, it's going to lead to furlough. It's going to lead to temporary layoff of workers. And we are not going to let that happen. And because of that fact, what happened in the 10-year treasury yield in the last couple of days, it's a reflection of the incompetence or the lack of confidence in US fiscal and monetary policies. Okay, so the 10-year yield shot up to 4.5%. Some say it was close to 5, but it wasn't published. And that was a reflection of other countries selling US treasuries. And most notably, is Japan. So Japan is one of the largest supporter of US treasuries. And what we have gotten word is that Japan was starting to sell their existing holdings of US treasury, and that drove the current yield of 10-year yield all the way up to 4.5%, close to 5%. And that was a wake-up call. And that was the signal that broke the White House or broke Trump. And that's why the 90-day pause was put in place. But it makes absolute sense because you cannot force any kind of change of current operations, especially in manufacturing, to do this in a short period of time. 90 days, I would say this is already very, it's a very tight timeline. But nevertheless, it is very important to have this process to begin and also to work through the rerouting of global supply shipment. And so with that said, I will take a pause here and wanted to know if there are any specific questions that I can address from any of the members here.
Thank you,
Okay.
Andrew, for the update. I
Mhm.
just a comment or question because you talked about how to have a trade tariff between countries, but I don't think that the US has calculated the tariffs correctly.
Yeah,
They calculated them based on deficiencies on the trade, but those are numbers that published by the US are incorrect. And um, therefore, what other country are doing, it seems like it's not like just to save their faces, but to protect their interests as well. And it is, um, 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 and I don't think that what the US is doing is correct because they said some of the example they said, oh, this country has applied 10% or 60% on
yeah,
the US, but that's not true. That's not correct.
yeah.
The calculation is not right.
Yeah.
Just comment.
So yeah, thank you for your question. So now I know which direction to go to in this conversation. Yes, you're absolutely correct. What was presented at the Rose Garden is completely ambiguous. The numbers do not add up, and they're incorrect. The whole board is incorrect. And the reason why is that tariffs, you can't really apply a blanket tariffs and make the statements like that because those numbers are incorrect. But the intent for the White House is to basically drop this bombshell and let 100 other different countries to contact the White House versus the White House making calls to 100 different countries and try to negotiate. So this is a strategy that is it moral? I would say, this is not the best way to execute. It causes a lot of chaos and everybody's up in arms. But the most important signal behind this noise is that this is the White House way of asking different countries to start negotiating because tariffs are product specific and they are country specific. And so to put a statement out there, I completely agree with you. Those numbers are false. Those numbers are false. But the intent is to have a deeper negotiating session, with each individual country and also with the manufacturer, the companies, to go over specific products. And so with that said, the good news is the negotiations are beginning. They're in process. And the biggest insecurity or the biggest challenge right now, it is still China because they are the number two, largest economy in the world. And to have this kind of disruption, it is not easy on anyone, on any one country, on any one company. So in the short term, we could expect a spike in prices. So inflation, short-term inflationary pressure, absolutely that will be there. But over the long term, we still believe the expansion in technology and innovation, as well as the stability of oil prices, will keep inflation at check, at bay. And so, do we think that we're going to fall into a deep recession as a result? Not if we are making good progress among the countries. That's one. And second, it is our belief that we have been in a rolling recessions already since June of 2022. As we measure the monthly economic activities, we have seen a negative number from June 2022 all the way to September 2024. And in between the months from then and now, it is still somewhere up and down. We're ping-ponging around there. So what we're seeing that this is going to be the last leg of this long-term rolling recession, and we're just actually coming out of it. So if we are correct, then the tail end of the rolling recession, it is kicked off by actually three things. One is a recession in high-end spending that have kept up the U.S. economy. Two is the recession in government spending that also have been stabilizing the system for the last 2 years. And then three is that the reinvestments in the U.S. that have claimed by the White House, because White House claimed that there's about $6 to $7 trillion that is committed to invest in the US to build out the manufacturing facilities and also build out the AI infrastructure. So even if we take that with a grain of salt, let's say, don't believe our orange friends numbers, right? They're they're not believable, but let's cut that in half. That's still about $3 to $4 trillion that's coming into the US. And so with the backdrop, with what has happened before, where we are in terms of a rolling recession, I still see that in the next 12 months, this is quite a positive for the US economy. But right now, this is the most painful moments that we have just experienced. And we believe that, unfortunately, this is very news driven and very, policy driven. But in our view, that we will be able to navigate out of this. And from an investment perspective, you need to stay invested. And if we should fall into a deeper recession or when the risk becomes paramount, then our signals will be very, very clear to make adjustments to basically reduce the risk inside the portfolios. But until then, we're staying invested. And what we're doing is that we are making adjustments within the portfolio to stay away from consumer names, to stay away from sectors that we feel that might be challenged, during these near term and current times, and also invest in opportunistic sectors. And right now, healthcare and biotech, as well as technology, it is still in the forefront of opportunities. As we see and receive confirmations that the AI spend, the innovation spent on automation, hardware, and software is not slowing anytime soon. And if there is going to be an influx of capital coming in to onshore and try to rebuild this manufacturing effort, then you can rest assured that construction spending is also going to increase, and as well as, again, the facility and equipment that is going to be needed out of these facilities. So it really gives me great comfort with all the facts that are coming in versus the sentiment that we are also receiving. So with that, I will just take a pause here and see if there's any additional questions.
I have a comment, but because
Sure.
from this committee or MCF endowment committee or council, or I'm not sure what the right name is, it's more interested to us as a members for this to know what's the strategy, which you touched on at the end of this. So what are we doing? That's the most important. And I don't see, I this is maybe a request to all of us here, or maybe specifically to Ola and Muhi. Um, 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 Maybe we should talk about that strategy and how often we need to update that, or I know you touched about it and which sector you recommend
Yep.
investing in, but I think I would love to have that and see if there's a feedback. For sure we would have some input to share with everyone, but that could be another topic by itself. That's my comment.
Yeah, no,
Sure.
thank you for that feedback, Brother
Mhm.
Nader. And just to put it out there, Andrew and Brother Ghori and our whole asset management team and the AMCF team as well, we have like an open door policy 100% in terms of discussing the specifics of this. If you are a hosted endowment, if you are a hosted endowment, part of you have full access to us and by extension to Andrew and Brother Ghori's team. So feel free at any time to reach out, want to set up a one-on-one, or we can do it as in a group fashion specifically for the endowments. Happy to like delve deeper. For the sake of time and giving our guests the time to cover their topic, I want to transition to Brother Safir and Brother Abdelwahab, who are here to present on endowment beginnings, growth, governance, and growth. And I know that you're introducing yourselves in the presentation, but just by brief introduction, Brother Safir and Brother Abdelwahab are both co-founders of the Islamic Endowment Foundation, along with another brother. And they both come with a wealth of experience and expertise in this area. Brother Safir working over a decade in the technology investing sectors, in real estate, public markets, and other spaces, and also served on the boards of endowments, so has experience in that capacity. And Brother Abdul Wahab, in his own right, a senior research analyst at the Federal Bank of New York, and is currently pursuing his master's at Columbia in statistics. So Brother Safir and Brother Abdul Wahab, the floor is yours, and we're excited to hear what you have to share.
All right, let me share my screen. Bismillah.
I just want to say thank you, Andrew, for the commentary. I think that was very well said. Balanced commentary of what's going on in the market, and things seem to be getting better than the initial reaction, which is great. But yeah, go ahead, Abdulwahab.
Yeah, so my name is Abdelwahab, just as Sister Ola has mentioned, and we're part of a nonprofit pending organization called the Islamic Endowment Foundation. And what essentially we're trying to do is we want to consult Islamic organizations in how to start their endowments, how to grow their endowments, how to build their endowments, how to lay the foundation for governance as well within endowments. And so this presentation is necessarily for any Islamic organization that either has an endowment or wants an endowment and wants to improve it and want to make it more sustainable for the future. So we do consultancy with Islamic organizations, as previously said, to ensure that we kind of meet all the goals that we want. Uh, I know there was already a explanation of who we are, but I guess I'll go a little bit deeper. Maltasim, who is not, unfortunately, couldn't make it today. He's the founder of Portola Springs, $17 million investment fund. He's the chairman of of a foundation that has an endowment with a $10 million value. And he's a graduate from UCLA. And then Safir, managing partner of Cordoba Funds, Friends and Family Cash Only Real Estate Fund with 10 million. And he also serves on the endowment board of IMRC and a couple other smaller endowments as well. And my name is Abdul Wahab. I worked at the Federal Reserve for 2 years as a research analyst and currently a grad student at Columbia. So I want this presentation, if anybody has any questions throughout the presentation, to feel free to just unmute yourself. If anything is very unclear, just frankly ask the question, and inshallah, we can get some feedback as we continue the presentation. Okay, so our agenda for today, so sorry about that. Present. Okay. So our agenda for today is pretty simple. We first define what an endowment is, and I know that might be below a lot of organizations here, but it's important to like specify exactly what an endowment does and why it's different from an emergency fund or a medium-term investment fund. The second thing we will talk about is specifically governance and what makes an endowment successful and sustainable throughout time. The third thing we will be talking about is risks to endowments in general that we have seen in a multitude of Islamic organizations that we kind of want to share and share that knowledge with you. And lastly, we will talk about the roadmap for planning certain things for your endowment and just talk about the services that we provide as a nonprofit. Okay, so first we'll be just defining an endowment, right? So an endowment is a pool of money that is invested to create a stream of income for your organization. So for instance, Harvard has around a $50 billion endowment. They let's say make $2.5 billion off of that every single year just from investing. And they take that $2.5 billion and they pay teachers with it, pay professors with it, run activities with it, and just operationalize their budget. So that, to a smaller extent, is what organizations are trying to do. It's what Muslim communities should be doing. It's what schools are doing, and it's what nonprofit organizations that have a firm monetary basis and a firm, resilient financial basis end up doing. So this is just an important note, right? So there are around 4 million Muslims in the United States, around 3,000 mosques as well. So ensuring that these masajid, these communities actually become sustainable and, 100 years from now, we don't have to um, ask for money every single Ramadan and, can just have a very strong and resilient budget for every organization is something that is absolutely critical. Um, Most religious organizations have endowments. I think around 33% of churches have endowments, which is a lot. And a lot of Jewish organizations also have endowments, whether it be temples, whether it be student organizations like Hillel, which is on campus. A lot of them have endowments and invest money so they can get that annual return to kind of do what they want to do and put that into their budget. And an interesting statistic is that we found that less than 1% of Islamic organizations have endowments, and this is through um, searching IRS filings that we found for Islamic organizations. We found around 1,200, and within the IRS filings, there's a portion that you need to complete if you have an endowment, and we saw that many organizations did not complete that because they don't have an endowment. So that's kind of like a pretty alarming statistic, I think. And I hope that's motivation for individuals to, talk a little bit more about endowments and ensure that endowments are sustainable across time, inshallah. Any questions so far?
I have a quick question on that 990 number.
Yeah.
I know mosques are not required to fill out a 990, and I would assume that even ones that have endowment are not filling that out. So the 1,200 number is outside of the mosque number. I just want.
Yeah, we took mosques out of it because they don't have to file 990s. Churches and mosques don't have to file 990s. So that 1,200 mark is not, does not have mosques in it.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so the second point in our agenda is what makes an endowment successful. It might surprise you that it's not necessarily based on investment performance, and it's more so actually based on how an endowment is run, the policies and procedures in place, and for instance, creating an endowment committee that enforces the rules and regulations of your endowment. So while investment is definitely a crucial portion of an endowment, that's maybe only like 20 to 30% of importance if I had to put a percentage to it. And we'll be talking about the other 70 to 80%. So endowment success, as Safir, Mu'tasim, and I have seen throughout multiple Islamic organizations and serving on multiple boards, starts with good governance. Good governance is the single most important indicator of success that we see in endowments, regardless of the endowment value or the monetary value or the shrewd investments behind investing that pool of money. So governance can broadly be defined and split into two different categories. The first category would be policies and procedures. So this is essentially your constitution for your endowment. It's the investment policy statements that you have for the endowment. And for those who may not know what an investment policy statement is that it's a document that's probably 5 to 10 pages or so that explains all of the operations of your endowment and explains the rules and regulations of the endowment. One of the important things is goal setting and ensuring that you have a specific goal for your endowment. Something else would be the spending policy, which is what percentage of your endowment value should you be spending per year. These are all very important policies and procedures that, frankly, a lot of Islamic organizations cannot create on their own because of lack of expertise. So this is one area that we personally have helped Islamic organizations in. I'll go to oversight and accountability pretty quickly. Um, The board of directors is, of course, as any organization, is still pivotal in creating endowments and ensuring that endowment funds don't get pulled and just um, if there are any changes to the endowment, they themselves would have to have a board vote too. And the other parts of oversight includes the endowment committee as well. I'm not sure if many organizations in this chat have an endowment committee within their own organization, but this committee is essentially a committee of financial experts, whether it be people who have experience, people who have a lot of experience and expertise in investing, in accounting, and who have an extremely strong career background in finance. These are individuals that will essentially assess the asset manager and ask the asset manager various questions, just as Brother Nadir was kind of mentioning a little bit, in the sense that you want to figure out the strategy of the asset manager. You want to see what their portfolio allocation is, their past performance, and etc. They also help with portfolio monitoring as well. So that's a broad characterization of what an endowment committee is. Unfortunately, individuals from the board are not always finance experts, right? And so the endowment committee is extremely crucial in ensuring that your endowment continues to grow as your organization grows as well. Do we have any questions so far? Okay, so I'll go quickly through these slides so that Safira can continue the presentation. This is just as I previously mentioned that endowments need robust policies. All of these policies are stipulated in investment policy statements, which is just the constitution for your endowment that tells you what you can and can't do, tells you what your goals are, stipulates Sharia compliance, stipulates what your spending policy percentage is, stipulates what you should be investing in and what the asset manager should be investing in, among other various important parts of your endowment. This is just a slide that shows kind of an investment policy statement that our team has created for organizations, and parts of it include just an executive summary, asset allocation, Sharia compliance, benchmarks for performance of investments, conflicts of interest, and various other things, all of which should be tailored to your specific organization and risks to your organization as well. Um, Now, if we go to the other side of governance, which is just the oversight and accountability, the most important thing is establishing an endowment committee, as I previously mentioned. That endowment committee of around 3 to 5 people engage the asset manager or even the foundation, and they ask the asset manager for quarterly reporting of the returns on investment, so you can see like what the returns are compared to benchmarks, fees of the actual asset manager, and what they're allocating their portfolio towards. And then we'll head over to major risks for endowments by Brother Safir. Safir, do you want me to continue sharing the screen, or would you
Sure.
like to share your screen?
Sure, yeah, you can go ahead. You can go to the next slide. Before I touch on the major risks, just to share with everybody, kind of one of the reasons why we started the Islamic Endowment Foundation was we were serving on several endowment boards, and we noticed a lack of best practices for how to actually run the endowment and actually have a defined IPS. So every investment policy statement, everybody kind of had their own version of their investment policy statement, and it was very vanilla, frankly, of saying like we will invest in this, but not being cognizant of how investment strategies should evolve over time, how you should diversify your assets, besides the stock market, and stuff like that. And so that's when we originally created the best practices. And then from there, we created a template based off of that through, talking to several other endowment managers and teams as well. So that was kind of like the birthing, if you will, of the organization. And I think the second part to maybe talk about before we get to the common risks is like what types of things, like, let's say you have your endowment hosted with AMCF, or you have an investment manager already. With that AMCF, you get a built-in investment manager with Andalus. But what are some of the things that the endowment committee should actually be doing in reality? So I would say a few like core things. One is talking with the asset manager on a quarterly basis or times like this to understand what the strategy is, obviously. But talking in crazy times as well is super important as well. So, you as the endowment committee should be defining what are the goals of the organization, how much funding are you trying to raise for the endowment, and then based off of how much new money is being added into the pool, then working with strategic asset managers to say how that should be kind of defined. And then also working with the board of directors to ensure that this money is really only for the endowment and starting to do kind of financial planning based off of that. So I'll get into a little bit more of the details with the next slide if you go to Abdelwahab. So this is kind of our I guess what we've seen happen in actual reality. It's not theory. It's like real things that have happened for Islamic organizations that we've worked with. And I don't think it's specific to only Islamic organizations. It's a general endowment problem. But the first one is generally using endowment money for operations money. So sometimes when you talk to someone, they'll say like, oh, we have an endowment. And then you ask them, okay, like, what's the endowment in? And they'll say like, oh yeah, it's in the market. It's in S&P 500 or it's in this mutual fund. That alone does not constitute an endowment. All it really means is that you have an investment account and you've allocated some money into some investments. If you don't have actually a structure and a policy to say how this money can be used, how long it should be deployed for, that's not really an endowment. So a lot of the times we hear people, they have stock donations or other things like that, and they have an investment account. But in order to really make an endowment, you need to actually put policies and governance in place kind of around it. And when you do that, you can protect yourself from endowment money basically being used for operations, right? So the endowment money should have 5, 10, 15-year time horizon instead of whenever there's a shortfall basically in capacity. And the reason why is, we'll talk about it later, is because the compounding power of your principal amount, the longer it stays in the markets, is extremely powerful. So the second part is the time horizon is often too short, right? So with the endowments, the benefit is that, compared to our individual investing capacity, an endowment's horizon is decades. Sometimes, at this point, there's some endowments going on for a century plus. And that allows endowments to take a very long-term horizon. And often in times like this, let's say of volatility, maybe we actually don't need to react as everybody else would, because our time horizon is so long and we can withstand any shortfalls in principle. So that's another thing to consider, is being very cognizant that a personal investment policy is very different than an endowment's investment policy, and kind of how you would react. The third part is the asset manager. Sometimes what we've seen is that the organization kind of almost overburdens the asset manager and expects them to do things around governance of the endowment. But what they're really should be focused on is managing the assets at hand. What's the investment strategy that should be done given the current market conditions, how you should reallocate capital, what types of companies you should be investing in, what is compliant versus not. And that's not just, that's not anything negative to put on the asset manager. It's just that's what their specialty is, and they're thinking about the investment strategy and not the governance and the endowment policy of the organization. And so it's very important, even if you have a hosted endowment with AMCF, to have an endowment committee inside your organization. It could be something as small as 2 or 3 people who can constitute of the existing board, or adding on a couple of other people, to ensure that the right questions and the right strategy is being asked to create the necessary policies and governance. The fourth thing that we see is insufficient governance. This is probably the biggest one, and again, why we created the organization was because really a lack of for example, defining what the time horizon should be for the endowment. What are the emergency cases when you can take out money, and what do you need to actually what does the voting structure need to be if in an emergency the endowment money needs to be pulled, for example. What should the compliance be about what you can invest in and what you cannot invest in? I think it's fairly well defined for stocks with things like Zoya or Ideal Ratings, but especially as an endowment starts to grow, it gets pretty complicated and hairy for alternative investments. And there's many other factors. So we have kind of divided up our document into a best practices section, and then the actual investment policy statement, which actually governs it. So you have both kind of the policy, but then also what kind of derived from the policy. And we're happy to share this with all the organizations, and we'll be publishing it probably this summer. But happy to share that in more detail. And then the fifth is what happens sometimes, unfortunately, is that generally there's not the pool of people that are can ask questions in the finance realm and have that knowledge, and to be working in finance as well. And so you have often conflicts of interest. And that's why it's very important to, number one, to be actually hiring an investment manager when you reach some amount of capacity, and we can discuss that. But then also is make sure that you have clear conflict of interest forms and stuff like that. It's not only important from a legal perspective. It's important, obviously, from an Islamic perspective that you have an amana on this money, which is basically the organizations. So those are the kind of 5 common risks that we see. I'll pause there because it's a lot. Any questions on this portion? Any questions? Okay.
So
Yeah, go ahead.
we're in a very early stages of our account, setting up the account and creating that endowment committee. Not even committee, setting up the endowment committee, setting up the endowment and then the endowment committee. Do you think that we should actually have the endowment committee as we set up this account, or simply have, my inclination would be to have to do the process of endowment under your guidance and then bring in those members?
Yeah, it depends on for every organization, but yeah, we some of them the endowment committee has been brought earlier. Some of them where it's more complicated and they kind of already have some structure, the endowment committee has been brought in beforehand. We will show it to you. Abdulwahab, can you skip down to 2 slides? So when we work with organizations, we'll kind of create a roadmap plan. So the first thing that we'll do, and we'll talk about how it is actually, is define like a goal and a spending policy. It kind of defines like, if you put in X dollars in the endowment, and let's say you're making 7-8% return, what will the endowment look like over time? And that just gives you kind of a financial projection. Then we kind of define what the portfolio allocation, very rough guidelines, how the portfolio should be allocated. We're not allocating like specific stocks. What we're really saying is like, at the small stage of 500K or $1 million, majority of your money should probably be in the stock market. It's liquid and stuff like that. You don't need to consider alternative investments. So it's a very, very high level. We're not talking about individual stocks here. And then we kind of define like the investment policy statement and then establish the endowment committee. So that's the typical flow, but sometimes it's been brought earlier, definitely, as well. The reason sometimes it's brought earlier is because organizations might have questions of whether it should be a separate legal entity and stuff like that, or they have some existing assets that need to be figured out before thinking about like the portfolio allocation. Those are some of the instances that we've recommended to establish the endowment committee beforehand.
I would say also, just to add on that, and to Sister Fatima's question, an endowment committee can occur while you're also establishing the endowment, as long as you actually do it. A lot of times endowments are established without any foresight or without a committee. And then maybe an endowment committee is created like 2 years later, after which maybe the endowment isn't really functional anymore. So as long as you really, as long as there's a plan to establish the committee concurrently with the endowment itself, that should be fine.
Yeah, and I would
This is
add on the timeline piece too, is to give yourself time frames, right? I don't know if you could speak to that, Brother Abdelwahab and Brother Safir, but like, we make it sound like an easy task, like you're going to do it in a day and check it off. Like creating an endowment committee takes time, right? Because you have to, recruit people, find the right individuals. Maybe you already have people in mind, but do they have the capacity? So there's time horizons even for each of these steps too. And I don't know if you can comment from your experience, like what are kind of average or reasonable time horizons for creating the committee or for developing your IPS, for example.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why people bring it about earlier, is because actually finding those people that already exist in the organization or outside of the organization. I would say the whole process takes about like 4 to 5 months from the time that you start thinking about an endowment to actually getting the policy, the endowment committee, and stuff like that. And you might be asking, like, why? Like, it's a simple like document that I need to just, you know, slap on, and it's mostly policies that have been built out. And the reason that, like, I would tell you that the 99% reason is because sometimes, very often in organizations, it's one or two people in an organization that are very focused on creating the endowment. But when they do that, they don't share education and knowledge with the rest of the organization for how we're expecting the endowment to be governed, who are all the people involved, and stuff like that. So it very quickly becomes an individualistic thing. And so what we want to do as part of this is really do education to people of, like, given your circumstances and stuff like that, how should your investment policy statement be defined? What are your goals from the endowment? You know, and who are some people that you should consider to, depending on what your circumstances are.
Also, somebody mentioned earlier about the percentage of the distributions on an annual basis. So what is that? What does that look like today or these days? What
Abdulwahab, could you go to the
percentage?
next slide?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I should have let you go through
No,
that.
it's perfect transition. So we basically have I won't show it right now just because it'll just look crazy in the chaos, but we have a spreadsheet that we work with you on of, you know, defining again what the initial balance is, how much do you estimate to be contributing per year, and then we basically have two components for when spending can begin. It's typically either the earlier of reaching some dollar figure, you know, let's say it started off at 500K and now you reach $5 million, or some period. So let's say like in 10 years. So typically the spending policy will say start at either 5 million or 2035, let's say. That's how it typically works. And then typically the spending policy is between 3 and 5%. I would say most of the time it's about 4%. And that ensures that the endowment can still grow while distributions basically are taking place. And the biggest lever that you basically have is to defer spending as long as possible. That ensures that the money can be compounded as much as possible. And then when you get into starting to do spending, the growth of the endowment is going to slow comparatively speaking. So we'll actually, we have like a dynamic spreadsheet that will walk you through this too, and then you can share it with, you know, the rest of your board members and actually play around with, you know, your fundraising goals and to see what, you know, the endowment should look like in the future.
Yeah, this slide, by the way, by itself actually takes about one meeting to explain correctly. So if you didn't understand that, that's fine. But to maybe make it a little bit simpler, if you invest, let's say $500,000 in your endowment today, you kind of want to keep that in the actual investment for as long as you can. And that's because every year you're making money and you're putting the money back into that $500,000 instead of spending it right away. So it's kind of important to keep that money without spending it for as long as you can. And then once you've increased the investment to, let's say, $2 million over 20 years or something like that, you just spend around 3% of that $20 million every single year.
All right,
Is it
go ahead.
possible to actually maybe aside from this meeting to perhaps have a word with you to actually look at our goals, our nonprofit goals, at what we are thinking and how the sustainability beyond ourselves so that this mission goes on? Would it be possible to have something like that with you one-on-one?
Yeah, that's, I guess that's Abdulwahab, if you can go to 2 slides there.
I'm sorry. I thought our meeting was ending at 12.
Oh, no worries.
Now
Yeah.
on,
Okay,
yeah.
I'm not
Yep.
gonna, just ignore me. Continue with your meeting, please.
I think
So
we've
this is
gone,
perfect.
this is
So
the
what
last slide
we
regardless.
Yeah, this is kind of a slide for what we actually do as the Islamic Endowment Foundation. So we work pro bono with all organizations. We don't charge anything. We're not giving investment advice. We are not investment managers for any organization. What we are really doing is providing consultation for organizations for how they should think about spinning an endowment up, what the strategy should be, and how to create that investment policy statement. So like the first intro call that we do with people would be actually like a slide deck like this, explaining to them what we do. And then after that, we would get into an engagement where we start to think about like, okay, what's the actual goal for the endowment? Is the goal to maybe provide help, supplement tuition, for example, if you are running a school, for example, is it to fund some amount of operations for the school? Sometimes you have restricted funds in these endowments too, for donors are donating for a particular purpose. And once we have that, then we'll start walking through the spending policy. We'll start walking through, some of the best practices and introducing you to some of those concepts. And then the steps that I kind of outlined in the timeline before. And then kind of at the end of this, the end result basically is the investment policy statement that gets instituted. And then will also work with you once you have the endowment committee to kind of seed get you kind of off the ground. And then we'll basically go in the background from there, and happy to stay in touch after through like the AMCF Endowment Council or something like that to continue offering support as needed. But that's kind of our role, is to provide education and consulting for spinning up the endowment in those 3 to 4 months. And then, we have a queue of organizations basically that we're working with. I think that's actually the last part of the presentation. So we can answer any questions that anyone has. I think I got some questions. Will the deck be shared? Yes, we'll share that with Sister Ola and the team, and she can distribute it. Any other questions we can answer?
So the spending policy can be our own, and as long as it's within the limits of what the governance policies are for the finance.
Yeah, so the spending policy might say the earlier when you reach like 5 years or 2035. So let's say you were in 2035, the endowment committee would look at something like that spending policy and say, how much money should we take out given this time? And then, one of the other considerations is like you can also defer some of this money, that you cannot do a distribution basically of some of that money. So that's kind of all defined in the investment policy statement and some of the decisions that the endowment committee should be making.
And you have shared with us an endowment policy, recommended endowment policy, or no?
So we have we have a template for the investment policy statement, and then based off of the conversations that we have, we will actually make one we will customize it and make it for you. So that's kind of the end product of like that once we finish working with you.
I have
Sister
a
Fatma,
question too.
can I add just a quick thing to Sister Fatma, to if you allow me, to what have been said to you, which is all is good and very important. I want you to know this is also a long process unless you have a very wealthy funder. So it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take a long time. And the curve that they have showed, there's an assumption there of annual return that goes into it. So I don't know what they have used as an assumption and what's the initial investments there, and if there's a recurring investment every year or not. That shows, and that's where they said the spending, they recommended 4%. Because usually the annual investment, the annual return, you'll get around 7 or 8%. But the other thing is, I want to also emphasize for you as an organization, for you to think about this. When you create an endowment, just you want to start that, don't do it just when you create an endowment committee, don't just do an endowment committee. Think about an investments committee overall. With it, that includes an endowment. That's number one. Number two is think about what's your goal, but also think, for example, AMCF, they have their own also statement policy that may be not aligned with your own policy that you're going to be creating. And you may think about another endowment doing your own, because now, for example, are you able to invest the way you want it? Are you able to withdraw? And that needs to be aligned with AMCF's policy too, for the fees. And these are the things that you need to think about, not just about this endowment that they are creating here through the AMCF.
Could you explain the second point again? I didn't understand that.
My understanding, which is not clear because I haven't been in the first meeting for this committee, or remember Nadia from our team was there, but AMCF has their own policy in terms of selecting what fund that we need to be investing in, what are the fees, the targeted fee that we want to target or be within. For example, if our strategy from our investment strategy, Culturingua, my organization, is to reduce the fee to invest in ETF, not have follow that's the Islamically compliance stocks, to reduce the fee. Can we do that? Well, MCF may not allow it. And that's the issue that I'm trying to understand. And that's why I talked earlier, I would like to understand more about the strategy here. And because internally, I'm thinking about it for our own investment strategy for our own organization. And if that doesn't, for example, if AMCF has its own investment strategy as well, then that's what we need to think about as individual organization. How are we going to proceed, or are we going to change our policy, or what's that? Is that clear or no?
Yeah, that's clear. So it's to follow up on your first statements, I think the curves that you saw were relatively conservative. We had a assumption of 7 to 8% of returns, and some recurring contributions every year. Right? We can send you the particulars if you're interested in that. To your second statement, there are organizations such as the Presbyterian Foundation. The Presbyterian Foundation has around like 1 to 2,000 churches invested with their own money managers. So those churches particularly, they don't have a say in their own portfolio allocation. However, there is another part of the Presbyterian Foundation that allows for each single church to have its own asset allocation. And then the asset manager will adapt to that. So there are multiple ways to do it. I think one way is for there to be individualistic portfolio allocations for each organization, or a common allocation for all organizations. That's definitely a discussion that would have to be furthered though by Brother Ghuria and Lucia and AMCF. I don't know if that makes sense to you.
Yeah, and I can step in to address that a little bit too. I mean, very valid point, Brother Nader. And I think the way we see it, one of the main reasons why we switched to Endalos Capital and Turn Our Financial Group was this very point that you're saying. Is what in mind we had, that we wanted to provide our hosted endowments more room for engagement, more basically empower them to be more in conversation about what is in their portfolio, what's invested. So it is true that AMCF, and that's part of the convenience service that we provide, is we're here to take care of it for organizations that aren't at the place or in the space to be able to do that on their own. And which we'll talk about in a second when we talk about opening an endowment with AMCF and what that means. But that is not to be at the exclusion of endowments being hosted with us and being more involved in their portfolio. Meaning, again, since the transition has been fairly new, this is still kind of an education piece that we're slowly educating our endowments on, but it is literally an open door policy of you want to set up a time with Andrew and Brother Hori to talk specifically about your endowments portfolio and look at all the assets and their allocation and to say, I don't want this, I want this, that's definitely a conversation that can be had. You are not obligated to stay with the standard or the default that AMCF is investing on behalf of everyone, just as a default, still very much in keeping with our values, our IPS, our kind of, we're following a philosophy and we've laid that out. And we'll be happy to share even more with our endowments, but we try to tread the balance between having that kind of convenience for those that want it and the customization for those that want it as well. Now I think what Brother Safir and Brother Abdelwahab are offering is also amazing and needed, and I think can go hand in hand even with being a hosted endowment, because some of these things, excuse me, some of these things, it's a matter of understanding maybe what is AMCF doing on the end of these things. And that's exactly what we want our endowments to do, is to have more awareness. What are we doing governance wise? What are we doing spending policy wise? And to really bring up the questions that need to be asked to make sure that we are all reaching for excellence in this space. Nobody's there, nobody's perfect, but that we are constantly developing and growing our policy and procedures to
Sure.
To make better endowments for the community. With that, I wanted to pose a quick question to Brother Safir and Brother Abdelwahab, which to me is kind of almost the elephant in the room with some of these conversations, which is what advice do you have for organizations that look at these numbers and are just like, this is way beyond us, like we are a small nonprofit. These are not the numbers we're working with. Maybe it's Harvard or the larger organizations, even in the Muslim states, because that's something AMCF is very passionate about, and we've talked about it. That the space that we are trying to occupy is encouraging organizations to just think in terms of long-term financial sustainability and endowment as a tool for that. But if these are not the numbers you're working with, what advice do you have? Whether in terms of fundraising strategy or just how do you adjust your vision and your timelines?
Well, one thing I will say is that it is a bit of a chicken and an egg issue in that many donors, one, are not even aware that many organizations have an endowment, but they're very skeptical about what's actually in the endowment and how it's being governed. And so once you've actually gone through this process of creating an investment policy and having an asset manager and working with organizations like AMCF, actually having marketing material that you can actually share with your donors and say, we have an endowment, this is what our goal is. This is kind of the high level with the strategy that we're taking. Again, that has nothing to do with the investment policy statement. That's like really the governance, has nothing to do with investment strategy. That has to do with governance and the endowment. That actually makes a big impact on potentially strategic donors. So that's one thing I would definitely say to do. And I think there is a shift in people's mind of building sustainable organizations. Like there are many nonprofit organizations that we talk to that are considering endowments, not only from their own selves, but from pressure and suggestions from donors as well. So I think we're at the right cusp of it, but I would not I would say that you need to go through this process before expecting any significant donor to put their trust and money for this particular purpose, because they want to see all of these aspects being done.
Yeah, to to add on that and to kind of show it from a more practical lens, if you're, let's say, an organization that only makes like $200 or $300,000 a year, or you have a 200 or $300,000 budget, even having a small amount just to start your endowment of like let's say like $20,000 or $30,000 is really its importance as well. You're not necessarily just going to start off with $1 million. And so even putting a small amount is something that's really important. Before you allocate that small amount though, and start building up the infrastructure for your endowment though, is there's an important kind of technicality in that you should definitely have an emergency fund. Um, an emergency fund is more important than an endowment. It's important to have like a 4 to 6 month um, window of just cash that you have just in case something goes wrong within your organization. And that's kind of when you start thinking about, okay, we have the short-term needs kind of quelled, and now it's time to start thinking like long-term a little bit more. Maybe we put $10,000 or $20,000 in some random mutual fund that's Sharia compliant, like MN or whatever, just to start off, and then slowly increase that amount and start with the infrastructure of your endowment as well. So
And for the Muslim nonprofits, our emergency funds actually equals our donor base. So whatever you have, whenever the need arises, you frantically call the very few of those pockets. Hey, listen, can you do this for us?
yeah,
It's
yeah, no,
unfortunate
that's
reality.
extremely
And it shouldn't be like that. And those donors and the money, the same amount of money, if we manage our emergencies better, the same amount of money can actually go towards the endowment and for the growth of the future generations, because that's really where I feel at this point in my life, it's extremely important to make my kids are no longer as important as my future grandkids. Because those this is a very hard reality, and I'm not sure if you are familiar with the statistics. We work at the grassroots level, and we see the percentage of younger people exiting communities, not just that, exiting Islam. It is the gravest realities of today, and none of us are really willing to face it. And we need to put our efforts, our money, and our time in saving that heritage and saving really, the ultimately all of us. So that's really where I think the three nonprofits that I work with, we're motivated by that. And although I represent only one nonprofit here, but I'm liking what you guys are doing, and I'm going to be asking the other two to actually think about having an endowment with you guys too, so that we can support this larger, larger than life goals, basically.
Yeah. No, well put. Yeah.
Any other questions we can answer? I know we only have 10 minutes, right? Sister Alice, if you want to take over for the last portion, if there's no other questions.
Yeah, Jazakallah khair, Brother Safir and Brother Abdelwahab. This really informative, really eye-opening, and I loved your response to the question I had about, kind of just putting things in context, and sometimes you need to take those first steps and
Yeah.
present that to the community for them to have buy-in that this is a good idea. And 100%, Sister Fatima, about your point, well taken, that this is really the space that we need to be working or thinking in as individuals, as individual organizations, but also as a collective of like, our institutions need to be thinking in terms of endowments and long-term and generationally, rather than just we need to get a space in 5-10 years, or we need programs to keep running for another year. So I really, really honored that you shared this with us. And I want to say, like, from the minute that it was actually a connection through our asset manager, Brother Horis, and he connected us to Brother Abdelwahab and Brother Safir and the work they're doing at IEF. Like it was an instantaneous, like we need to collaborate, work together. Although we're doing, there's overlap between what AMCF is doing and what they are doing. We see our work completely as compatible and collaborative rather than competitive. We have the same goal for the Muslim community. And I hope, inshallah, we could both work individually and together to help organizations reach their goals in terms of endowment building. And having said that, I'd like to share a little bit about what AMCF does as well to support endowments. Like I said, kind of a different approach, but a lot of overlap. But what AMCF offers, and many of you who are already endowments know this, so I apologize, that's a bit of a review. But we, as a community foundation, we host endowments for 501c3s. And what this means is that we are in possession of the endowment funds for the benefit of your organization, if you have an organization with us. And that kind of flow chart that I love so much that Brother Safin and Brother Abdelwahab shared of the governance structure. AMCF basically provides a large portion of that. I'm not going to say every single piece because I saw things like fundraising, and really the fundraising is on the endowments, although we have ways to support with that. But in terms of having an asset manager, in terms of having an investment committee, we have an investment committee that is actually working currently on updating our IPS. So all those pieces that are kind of just the key fundamental pieces to good governance, AMCF has that in-house. And if you would like to open an endowment with us, you basically get the benefit of having at least a guaranteed minimum governance structure and policies and procedures that are guiding your endowment as it grows, inshallah. Like I said, that doesn't exclude the need for talking to someone like IEF, the brothers at IEF, to understand that governance more, to see what you can be doing on your end as a hosted endowment. So even if you haven't a hosted endowment with us, it'd be really great to connect with them and see, okay, what can we do to make sure that we're engaging in the right way, we're asking the right questions. We've also allowed, and we've had organizations split funds, and we're totally open to that too, where they have some with AMCF and some on their own. So we try to be as flexible as possible to meet the needs of organizations. Our ultimate goal is that you are thinking in this way, you're thinking about the endowment building, and that we can help you start it. And these are our current hosted endowments. Just want to give them a highlight and a thanks that they are with us. Some have been from the start, and some are new additions. And each and every one of them have an amazing mission. I know we've shared it in other past endowment council meetings where we've had it was a little more informal, and we've had people share about their individual missions and what their goal is with their endowment, and we'll continue to do that through these meetings. That's part of the purpose of this meeting, is really the community building, to understand what each other's missions are, and to also share information, share knowledge, share about endowments and otherwise. In terms of what we see as advantages of having an endowment with AMCF, again, along with our amazing team at Andalus Capital and Turner Financial, we are able to have more customized asset allocation. I mentioned this a couple of times, so the one-on-one consultations directly with the asset management team, and also with us if you have questions about the governance piece. And then really one of the most superb value adds that we have loved in transitioning to the new asset manager is they have a real-time endowment. Every hosted endowment has access to a real-time endowment portal where they can go in anytime, see their balance, see all the transactions that Andrew is doing in the background, are like market ninja here in the background doing all of this, they can see really a track record of everything that's happening in their endowment, pull performance reports, quarterly reports, in addition to being able to reach out and just have a conversation if needed. And then access to this space and this community. Like I said, normally this is a closed space for endowment council members, but we wanted to open it up to the community in this particular time. So all of these we see as kind of advantages of having an endowment with us. And again, for those that are new or not currently a hosted endowment, if you're interested, I'll have the email that you could reach out to, but you can go to our website, and I'll also drop it in the chat before we wrap up. You can see on our website an interest form that you can complete and connect with me to have an initial informational call. And really the steps after that are pretty easy in terms of there's an agreement, you sign it, we open the fund, we have a donation link, and you begin funding it. So the setup is really easy, which is a point that Brother Safir and Brother Abdelwahab brought up. Setting up the endowment is not the hard part, but it is actually the work that goes into pre and post. Are you creating the governance? Are there people in your organization that are aware and going to be engaged constantly with us as a team to keep up abreast of what's happening with the endowment, going to be checking that portal, going to be looking at the performance reports. So the real work comes really after, right? And then engaging the community in this fund that you've created, getting them excited about it, making it a regular part of your fundraising to fundraise for your endowment, not just for operations and so on. But we are there with you throughout the ride. We don't open the fund and let you go. We're there every step of the way and are here to be a resource for you and your organization. So I will stop there. That is, I promised that I would share the slide with our email. But that is basically what I have to share, and I will open it up to just anyone who wants to say general comments or questions for Brother Safir or Brother Abdelwahab, or maybe even if Andrew is still on, or general comments. We will be happy to take those at this time.
One last question. I'm sorry. I'm dominating the conversation. I'm so sorry. One last question. You mentioned the link. So can we actually take the link that you give it to us and put it on our website to have our donors fund the endowment?
Yes. I'm so sorry. I thought it was a question for Brother Safir first. Yes, absolutely. Connect with me, Sister Fatima. Yes, we actually have all of them listed on our website, like linked on our website so yours is up there. You might not just realize it, but I can give you the link, and I could also give you the embed code if you want to embed it onto your website.
Okay, thank you. And do you participate in the federal charities list?
The federal charities list, that's not ringing a bell. No.
Okay, we'll talk later.
If you don't mind sharing. Yeah, please do share about that.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Anyone else before we close? Right on time. It's 1:29, mashallah. But if anybody has a question or anything, I'd be glad to stay. Awesome. Well, with that, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Brother Safir and Brother Abdelwahab. Once again, thank you, Andrew, for the amazing market update, and everyone else for joining, and look forward to connecting offline and inshallah in future council meetings.
Thank you.
Inshallah. All right, assalamu alaikum, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Ola, can I have a minute after everyone leaves?
Yes, no problem. I'll stop recording first.
Thank you.
All right, I just didn't want to take up any meeting time or anybody else's time.